Hello, and welcome to another episode of your Bish Therapist podcast. I am your host, Melissa Reich, your Bish therapist. Today's episode is going to be an intense deep dive into Monica Garcia's relationship with her mother, Linda. And of course, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to talk about who Monica is. I'm going to really lay the groundwork for those of you who don't watch, what their relationship may be. Over the weekend, I got so many people reaching out to me about this particular dynamic. They really wanted my thoughts and feedback on it. And sometimes people will DM me or email me and say they, want me to cover X, Y, and Z. But this was like, it was so many messages about please cover Monica and her mom. So here I am. That's what we're doing today. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about who is Monica Garcia, who is her mom, Linda. I'm going to talk about multiple scenes and what I observed with their relationship because for those of you who don't know, I stopped watching Real Housewives of Salt Lake City for a couple of reasons, but the main one is Mary Cosby. It is bananas to me that Bravo has a person like this, just like continues to feature them, continues to, promote Mary's bad behavior. I mean, so in watching, I did have to go back and watch these interactions with Monica and her mom, and I kind of fast forwarded through everything else. But I just want to say that I think Mary Cosby makes being a terrible human an Olympic sport. And I'm so confused why, Bravo continues to have her on her TV, but that's a whole other story. And for those of you who are interested, I did an episode about there's something about Mary Cosby and her family. So please go back and listen to that. If you haven't, it'll give you a little bit more background into my frustration with Mary. I just don't like people who say that they're spiritual leaders and then are just the most miserable humans to everybody. That is incongruent, and I am not here for it. So that's one reason why I don't watch it. The other reason why I don't watch it is because I know this may sound, I don't know. I feel like Lisa and Meredith and even Whitney a little bit are like caricatures of themselves. It's just, I don't know. I just don't find it incredibly interesting to watch. I think, Meredith, sometimes there's a lack of authenticity and there's a performative nature to her on the show, which for me, what I always loved about Housewives is just like the genuine, authentically wild, antics. And to me, I don't know, Salt Lake City just feels a little bit different to me. So if you love it, no shade. I'm glad that you do. It's just, for me, I'm just not into it. I'd be happy to watch once Mary Cosby is off the show. I think I can get over that part of it. But until, while she's still on our screens, I just have no interest. So I'm going to talk about all of that. And before I get into the Monica and her mom of it all, I did just want to say thank you for people had reached out over the last week. It's been a very hard week for me. And sometimes for me, when things are challenging, I tend to just kind of go down and be quiet and just, I'm not on social media. I just need to take some time, and some people noticed. And so I appreciate the care and concern. I am okay. And I just feel that, I'm feeling, I think, what a lot of people are feeling. So this is just why I wanted to talk about it briefly before I get into the episode, is that I just feel the world has been really heavy with a lot of heaviness and grief lately, between what's going on, in our world, basically, the violence and the senseless tragedies, that's one thing. And then, for me, I always talk about how grief begets grief, right? So when you're kind of feeling grief about one thing and then other things happen, it just becomes like a grief landslide. And so this week, that's just what's been happening for me. Dealing with chronic illness is, every day is a new adventure. And sometimes those adventures aren't fun, but you're forced to take them anyway. And, I have been doing this for years. I will continue to do this for years. I'm okay. I can handle my stuff. But, it's just grief over not having control of your body is tough. So for all people who are dealing with a chronic cancer, a chronic illness, I see you. Plus, the one thing that I do just want to say is that when our mental health or our mental state is we're having trouble, we can physically feel that. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about like our minds and our bodies are connected. They're one entity. They're not separate, despite what everyone on the planet would like you to believe. So when you're having a tough time mentally, for people with chronic illness, you're going to feel that physically. And it doesn't mean both aren't real. It just means, when I'm having a harder time, so does my body. And that's just how it goes. So I want to let people know that if that's what you're experiencing, it's okay. Just, observe it. And all we can do is just feel the feelings until it passes and cope and use our coping strategies and things like that. But the last thing I do want to say is that for people who struggle with seasonal affective disorder, so for those of you who don't know, seasonal affective disorder, the acronym is SAD, S-A-D, because I still don't know if that's truly, if someone just like made that up and just wanted it to say SAD. I don't know. I don't know if that's a happy coincidence or not. But so seasonal affective disorder is tough because for people who struggle with depression, which I do, so I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder and major depressive disorder. So in the winter, I live in Northeast Pennsylvania, and in the winter, so right now it is dark at 4:30 and it is freezing cold until probably March. So for me, I notice every year around this time, my mental health takes a little dippity-doo-dah, and it's just from the lack of light. And, so the one thing that I want to suggest to people who are listening to this, who feel like they may struggle with seasonal affective disorder, one thing I recommend is getting a seasonal effectiveness disorder light lamp. So I have one, I don't get paid to do this. I'm just promoting this for your own wellness, which is, you don't have to get the one that I got, but just Google seasonal affective disorder or SAD lighting. And the important thing to know is that for a light to be effective for seasonal affective disorder, it has to be 10,000 lux at least. It has to be 10,000 lux. So you can just go ahead and Google that and get yourself a light. And I use it every morning. And it's just supposed to help your body adjust to the lack of light if that's also an issue where you live. I have people who listen from all over the globe, and not everybody is experiencing this type of weather, this type of darkness, etc. So if you are, that is a hot tip from me to you. But a couple of other hot tips that I just want to share that I kind of use to help me get through this week is, if you need to like take a step back from the internet, we don't always have to be engaging despite, popular belief. It's like, we don't always have to be giving our opinions all the time. We don't always have to be engaging. We don't have to read all the news. We don't have to be so informed that it's hurting our mental health. So I just think my message to people listening and watching this is that just take an assessment of your own personal well-being and just see where you feel like you might need a little tune-up. Most people that listen to me are women. And so I want to say that I think that sometimes women, we just don't take good care of ourselves. We focus so much on taking care of other people and everything else. We're just like kind of conditioned societally to do that. So if you're feeling burnout, take an inventory. Just quiet time. You don't even have to meditate. Just like check in with yourself and see what you might need. The reason why I'm sharing this is because it's hard to get back on track and to figure out where to go if you're not sure where you're at and what you might need. So that self-assessment portion can be really imperative in dealing with this kind of stuff. So we're all going to be okay. We'll get through it together. I'm here to help. I'm here to support. And I'm here to share my experience, strength, and hope. Because, for me, why do I have this platform if I can't share these experiences and try to help people? So I hope this has been helpful. Okay, now let's move on to Monica Garcia and her mother, Linda. So for those who don't know, Monica Garcia is on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Okay, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, this is their 4th season. They're a newer franchise. And I also think for me, that's part of maybe why it feels a little bit weird. I feel like these ladies came in and they were fans, and that's kind of new for Housewives because we haven't had a ton of new franchises. Successful franchises, I guess I should say. So, and that's no shade. It's just, whatever. But I think that sometimes for me, Salt Lake, they feel like fans, or I don't know. There's just something about it that feels off. So Monica is new. So she is new to season 4. And so in the beginning, when I was watching it, there were a couple of scenes with Monica and her mom, who is called Vovo, because Monica and her mother are Portuguese and Colombian, I believe. Yes, Monica is Colombian and Portuguese. And obviously so is, her mother is Portuguese. And, it started off where Monica and her mom would have these conversations. They would speak their language and, just bring a little bit of diversity, to the show, which I think was cool. And it was cool, because sometimes, certain Housewives franchises can lack a little bit of diversity. So I just thought it was interesting to have, like, her mom's mom was an immigrant, and our country was founded on immigrants, and so I just found it very interesting. So Monica's whole thing, for those of you who don't know her, I'll just put this out there really quick, is she was born in Boston. And then her mother moved her to Pennsylvania. I'm going to talk about that. When she was in junior high. And then I guess they moved back to Boston. But the real main stuff here with Monica is that she's an only child. Her mom and her dad never married. And her dad, she said her mom and her dad had an argument, and one day he just left after the argument when Monica was 4. And the reason why that is crucially important to me is that I've talked about this before on my other podcasts. When little brains who do not know how to process things properly experience something like this, I guarantee that was a formative memory for her, in terms of sometimes you can have an argument with someone and they can just leave and you'll never see them again. I guarantee that had to impact little Monica's brain for sure. So Monica, the other very interesting thing about Monica is, so she is divorced from her husband for the 2nd time. So she was married to David Fowler. They have 4 kids. They got divorced, and then they got either remarried or reconnected, and then now they're divorcing again for a 2nd time. That is fascinating to me. I tried to dig and find out more information about this, and I just couldn't. There's not enough information on Monica, like, just available. So I will be very interested to hear more of the story. And the other very interesting thing about Monica is that she was excommunicated from the LDS Church for having an affair with her brother-in-law for like 2 years. And to be clear, the brother-in-law was her husband's sister's brother. Yikes. I mean, that is messy in all caps. So Monica, she is a very interesting person. And when I was deep diving into all of the issues between her and her mother, it is apparent to me why she is the way she is. So I'm going to talk about that. Now, I am going to start off by giving a trigger warning because today I'm really going to be discussing concepts of narcissistic abuse, narcissistic mothers and parents, emotional abuse, generational trauma, cycle breaking, boundary setting, things like that. So this is going to be, for those of you who were very triggered by this, which many of you were, because so many people reached out to me and were so triggered by this. So if you were triggered watching this, listening to this may actually help you, because I'm going to explain what we're seeing. I'm going to explain narcissistic abuse, what that is. And I'm just going to validate the hell out of everyone listening who ever dealt with a narcissistic parent, because you're not crazy and you're all amazing. So let's hop to it. Okay, so the first scene that I want to discuss was Monica, the scene with Heather discussing her mom. Like they were in that little, they were like by the fire, and Monica was talking about like how her relationship with her mom is very volatile. And when you hear that word, language, I think that language is very important, and the words that people use to describe things tells you a lot about their situation. So as soon as she said volatile, I thought, that's really interesting. So when Monica was 12, by the way, so when she was in the scene with Heather and she started to discuss this incident when she was 12 and her mother like left her with a family, Monica cried. And I could tell in that moment that Monica she was little Monica in that moment. And it's interesting because Monica does have a lot of awareness, and she talks about her inner child, like little Monica. And I'm going to be focusing a lot on that because we all have inner children that they never stop being sad about having a narcissistic parent. Like it's never going to not be sad and disappointing. So I think there's a lot of value for me too in talking about inner child work and how we can soothe our inner child. But when Monica starts crying, and you can tell she's little Monica now, and she's just like so hurt by the abandonment of her mother. So her mother literally one day left her with a family in Pennsylvania. And so here's the thing. I live in Pennsylvania, and I am like, where in Pennsylvania? Was it where I live? Was it somewhere else? Pennsylvania is a really big state for those of you who don't know. I live in Northeast PA. There's also Pittsburgh on the other side. And to drive through Pennsylvania, it's about 4.5 hours. So it's a really big state. But I was just curious, like, where was she? Because the culture of Pennsylvania is very different depending on where you go, especially when you're used to living in a city. Like she was from Boston, I was from Chicago. And so there's some parts of PA where, when my parents moved me here when I was in high school. So we moved from Chicago, Illinois to Sugarloaf, Pennsylvania, and it was like a culture shock. So the reason I bring that up is that her mom moved her to Pennsylvania to stay with his family, and she was starting junior high in like this very new place. And again, as someone who's experienced the trauma of that is intensely traumatizing. You're being removed from your home. Okay. You're staying with a family who, they were family friends that, Monica claims she didn't really even know very well. So you're living in this new situation. You're in this town in Pennsylvania. You're going to a new school, and your mom is in New York, trying to live her dreams. And I think that, one of the things that if Monica listens to this, I hope she does listen to this, she already knows so much about the situation. But sometimes when you know things, or you have a gut feeling, and you have a narcissistic parent, you've been gaslit so much that you just think, well, maybe I'm making this up, maybe this isn't real. But I'm here to tell her that it was real. When she talked about abandonment, feeling abandoned, she literally was abandoned. Like that is the definition of abandonment. Okay. So Monica's father left when she was 4, and literally she doesn't even know what he looks like. There's been no contact. He moved to Florida. Monica said something about that he was gay and he moved to Florida to be with his partner, and she just never heard from him again. I mean, that's her self-report. I don't know, if that's accurate or not. But the point is this. If your child's father has left and you are their only parent, And you fail to see how that might impact your child to just like leave them with a family while you go off and live your dreams. That tells me a lot about Linda right there. Sure does. Tells me that Linda cares about Linda and that she just lacks a lot of empathy and awareness. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say about that. And the thing for me that is wild is that Monica talked about, when she was talking with Heather, she said, I wouldn't have left my bed today if it weren't for you. And so what I can tell in that scene was that Monica is swimming in the emotions of all of what happened to her when she was a child. And so she doesn't have strong roots. So when her mom does something or she gets upset by something, she just like flows in the breeze because Monica hasn't done the work yet to get those strong roots, which no shade. It's scary to think about doing that work, but I can just tell that she hasn't done it. And because here's the difference. When you've had childhood trauma, narcissistic abuse, whatever it is, and you get triggered by something, I can usually get my roots strong and remind myself that this is not before, this is now. I am safe, I am comfortable, and I am in control. And it shows you that Monica just isn't in that space yet, which fair enough, but I hope that she can get there. Because living in that space where you're just kind of flown with the breeze, it's just, it's terrible. It's really terrible. So the example that I'm going to use to talk about, so Monica's mom has come forward to refute a lot of these claims. And I printed out some of her tweets because they were so ridiculous. So first of all, Monica's mom on Twitter is LD Millionaire, which if that name isn't a red flag, I don't know what is. But she just like has come forth and tried to like dispute all of these claims that Monica has made. And it's just like, it would be so much easier if you could just be like, yeah, I'm sorry, I fucked up. But like narcissistic parents cannot do that. They're just like incapable of doing that. So it's like Monica's never going to get what she wants or needs for her mom. And you could just tell she's not in an acceptance stage about that. Because it takes a lot of trauma work to get to that acceptance stage. It takes a lot of work with yourself, with your emotions, things like that. But here's why this is so damaging. Linda tried to come forward and say she knew the family, she was familiar with them, blah, blah, blah. And so Linda does things like plays with semantics, and I just don't play that. I do not play the semantics game. There are ways that people try to use words to like escape their accountability, and I'm just not falling for it. So, my sister has 3 kids. Okay. They are the literal loves of my life. I sincerely had no idea that love like this could exist until they were born. I don't have children of my own, but I adore them. They adore me. We FaceTime every day. We're together every weekend, every Christmas, every birthday, open house, what have you. I am there. Those kids are the loves of my life. And the reason why I'm sharing this is that when I leave my sister's house, my littlest niece, she's going to be 6. She's so cute. She literally clings to my leg like a koala and cries and says she wants to come home with me. And guess what? If my sister dropped those kids off here one day and left to like do something else in New York, those kids love me. I'm the closest thing they have to another mother. They'd be happy for the first couple days, but then guess what? They'd be devastated. Do you know why? Because nobody can replace a parent. That's just the fact of the matter, is that no one can replace a parent. So Linda can say all the things that she feels like she needs to say to like escape her accountability for this, but she could have dropped off Monica with her closest relative, and it still would have been hard because she's in a new state. She's starting junior high in a new school, in a new culture, in a new environment. It's just such a bullshit excuse. So I'm just going to say that. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about the scene where Monica was, I couldn't figure out what they were doing. It looked like Monica and the other girls, they were like tailgating or something. I know that wasn't it, but they were like outside in foldable camping chairs, just like, I don't know. Again, it looked like tailgating to me. But so this is where Monica talked about that her mom takes her car when she's angry with her, which is a classic move of a narcissistic parent. And to be clear, I'm not saying that Linda has narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not saying that. I can't say that. I don't know her. She's not my client. I am not here to diagnose her, but I am here to say, here are these qualities that I'm seeing, and then you can all judge for yourself. So her mom apparently took this car that was in her name. She threatened to call the police, et cetera, et cetera. So here's my question. Why is this car in her name? Why? What is the reason? I think that from my guess is that Monica, after her divorce, like when she was married, she didn't have to worry about money. And now that she is getting divorced, she does. And she has a small business, but, it's still, I think, newish. And so maybe she needed her mom's financial help. I don't know. But here's what I want to say about this. When you have a narcissistic parent, you cannot put yourself in the position where they have power over you for any reason. And that's sometimes impossible as an early adult when you're just starting out. And if you need help with a loan or a car payment, what have you, the reason you can't do that is because they're always going to use it for power and control over you. Always, every time. So my message to Monica is, if she can't afford the car, which, listen, I get it, right? You're on Housewives. You don't want to be pulling up in a hoopty. I understand that. But at the same time, you have two choices. Are you going to sell your soul? Because essentially that's what it is. Are you going to sell your soul for a nice car, or drive a Hyundai and just afford it and get your mom off of there? You know what I mean? So this is not meant to be judgmental. It's just meant to say, I wish for Monica to get herself out of that situation, because until she does, this stuff is going to continue to happen. She needs her mom off of everything. She needs to be independent and on her own. And so in my opinion, it would behoove her to drive a less nice car that she can afford and that she can own, so that she isn't essentially selling her soul. Because that's what it is. And the thing that I found so fascinating about one thing that Monica said in this scene, which I definitely wanted to address, is that, the other ladies were like, oh, your mom seems so nice. Because don't forget, before this, her mom came to Angie's Easter brunch, luncheon, whatever they called it. And so the ladies, they kind of, they have met her mom. They feel she's lovely. And Monica said, it's like Ted Bundy. And I just laughed so hard, because she's 1,000% right. When you have a narcissistic parent, especially a narcissistic mother, it is like Ted Bundy, where they look great on the outside. For example, like these parents always have different public faces. And in fact, a narcissistic parent, especially a mother, might have even participated in your life on the outside, like school events or, community events, what have you. They have a very different public face. And then they go home and then they're mean or cruel or not loving. And it leaves the little child to be like, well, what is happening here? You were just my biggest fan. And now all of a sudden you can't bother to like hug me or talk to, it's very confusing, right? So it really is like Ted Bundy. It's like, he got away with his stuff for so long because he was, well, people say he was handsome, but I don't particularly think he was handsome. I guess he was handsome for back in the day. He had quite a unibrow and just, I don't know. I'm also able to sense people's stuff. So he always gave me the willies. But anyway, I think it was a good analogy as my point. And so for anyone listening to this who did grow up with a narcissistic mother or narcissistic parent, you're not crazy. That happened. It happens where on the outside of the house, they're like, they have this different public persona. And then inside it's like, shoo, shoo, fly, don't bother me. So your feelings are valid. You're not crazy. And it is just like Ted Bundy. Okay. So now I'm going to go to the scene with Monica and Linda at the restaurant. I swear to you, if I technologically knew how to, I don't know how to do this stuff where like I pull up the video on my YouTube and I show the video and I talk about it. I just am not technologically savvy enough to know how to do that. But if I did, I could go scene line by line, giving interpretations, because that's how ripe with dysfunction this scene was. So I'm going to talk about it bit by bit. So the first thing when I first watched it and I see Monica's mom crying, I like immediately just knew what she was doing, which was trying to emotionally manipulate. Monica's mom has a feel of narcissistic traits and tendencies with a dash of drama, which is also known as histrionic. So it seems like there is some complicated stuff maybe going on here for Linda, because let's also keep in mind, right, for everyone listening to this, with a narcissistic parent, just like narcissism is on a continuum, well, the same is true of that for parents who have these tendencies. There are some people who they have, mildly narcissistic parents that, it's frustrating, it's invalidating, but they don't have to go no contact. And then on the other end is really, really serious pathology. Really, you can't have contact for your own. It's life-saving to not do that. So keep in mind, everyone, I am talking about this all on a spectrum, okay? Because we all have narcissistic traits and tendencies. We all do. Well, I guess except for Tom Sandoval. Ugh, give me a break. So immediately I can tell that Linda is trying to emotionally manipulate. So she starts crying and she's covering her face. This is very common in narcissistic mothers, is the emotional manipulation card. That is like usually the first thing that they go to. Okay. And here's how you know it's not real. Because when Linda starts telling a story then. So she's crying as if that's not enough emotional manipulation. She starts telling this story about a mother and a child who the mother died before they got to have this great relationship. That's also part of the manipulation, because what it is, it's saying, you have to treat me better before I die. Otherwise you're going to feel bad. It's all about Linda. It really is all about Linda. So, it also, like, what the initial scene, what these initial couple sentences tell me is that Linda wants Monica to attend to her needs without having to attend to Monica's needs. And so that's another really common thing with narcissistic parents, is that they need you, the child, to care for them because, well, there's a million reasons. But they want you to attend to them without reciprocating and attending to you. And the thing about relationships is that any relationship, I don't care who it is, if it's a parent, if it's a friend, if it's a coworker, it has to be reciprocal. That is the keystone to relationships. It has to be two people reciprocating communication, respect, love, all these things. And so what a narcissistic parent does is says, you give me all that, I'm going to give you none of it, and you just be fine. Okay. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. So here is what is so amazing. As soon as Monica starts to call out correctly what Linda was doing, Monica was like, so you tried crying. Check. And then there was an immediate switch to anger. And so that's how you know when there's true emotion versus emotional manipulation. Okay. If you call it out and then there's an immediate switch to another tactic, that's manipulation. So Linda then immediately switched to anger. And the one thing she said is that, Linda was like, I'm not going to talk to you like some weak ass bitch. Ooh, like what? Who's like, what are you talking about? So for me, it was an interesting choice of words. It was kind of sadly amusing, but it tells me that well, A, Monica's mom has tried this a million times. And so when she doesn't get her way through that, then she's going to turn angry, because it tells me that she's had success with Monica before, just like being angry and trying to gaslight her. So she's been successful with that. So she's going to go ahead to that well. But also it tells me that Linda just like does not understand her own emotions, and she's flapping in the breeze like all over. Linda needs some serious emotion regulation, like very, very serious, and also some awareness and insight into how her emotions are impacting her, because, for her to just talk about this stuff, like, it's fine, I'm over it. It's like, oh, woof, you don't have any idea how you actually feel. And the other thing that I found so funny and interesting is Linda kept asking for an aspirin. So here's why that's so significant, because not only is she trying to distract and make Monica feel bad for her, right? Because she has this headache, she needs an aspirin, blah, blah, blah. She's also literally in pain. That is the part where my therapist brain can kind of see some subtext, and she's literally looking for aspirin, but she's emotionally and psychologically in pain. And I don't think either of them were aware of that, but I think it's interesting that she used that as kind of a tactic to distract a little bit. So then Linda, Monica calls her out, you tried crying, check, you tried yelling, check, and none of it worked. And then Linda calls her a motherfucker. So that is also a super interesting choice of words, because Linda is her mother and you're calling her a motherfucker. It's just so weird and gross, and maybe a little bit Freudian. I'm not totally sure. But here's how I interpret this. I interpret this as Linda's continual lack of accountability, and just blaming Monica for everything. So like, I'm your mother and you're fucking me over, right? Pardon my language, but Linda used a lot of curses, so I'm going to use her language, okay? And I think she just, Linda would be really happy if Monica just like went along with the program. Most narcissistic parents want that. They just want their child to just stop having these pesky feelings and stop holding them accountable and just like go with the flow, right, man? So I think she just blames Monica for a lot of stuff. I think, Monica talked about there is a line of resentment in this family, and this is the resentment that we're seeing. The resentment was easy for me to pick out, and I'm going to keep sharing with you my observations about this. Because, Monica really did bring up a good point that there's this familial generational trauma of mothers and daughters having these bad relationships. And so why is that, right? Okay, well, I've talked about epigenetics before. So epigenetics is where our genes meet our environment. Because, we're looking at two women here, right? Monica made it really clear, and I'm just flipping to the other side of my notes. Monica made it really clear that Linda's childhood was absolutely horrific. And of course, it would have had to be to create Linda, because what I can tell is that Linda is in pain. What Monica said about Linda is that Linda's mother, hated her. She never wanted a daughter. She was emotionally and physically abusive. And you can tell that, right, in Linda's presentation and her behaviors. Because when we have our mother treat us that way, it's going to impact the way that she interacts with her daughter. And that is what generational trauma is. Now, you look at someone like Monica, who is a cycle breaker, and you think, well, why is Monica able to do this, but Linda was not? Okay, so let's go back to epigenetics. Epigenetics tells us that there's a ton of factors. It's nature and it's nurture. So Linda's genes are different than Monica's. I mean, slightly. Monica, has a different father and, all that. But these two just seem, first of all, when you have an immigrant family, the trauma is going to be worse at the top of the ranking. And then it's going to trickle down. And as it trickles down, that is what gives cycle breakers some of the opportunities to deal with it, because it's, I get the feeling that Linda's trauma was so intense that she just had to survive. And so there's something called the hierarchy of needs. It's Maslow, who was one of the best in psychology. He came up with this hierarchy of needs, which is literally a triangle. And at the bottom of it, it says, like, if your basic safety needs aren't met, whereas if you're experiencing abuse, if you are experiencing homelessness, if you're not able to get enough food to feed yourself, there are going to be things that you fundamentally aren't going to be able to do because you're just trying to survive. Okay. So Linda was just trying to survive, and she didn't have the time or the ability or the emotional resources to say, okay, I want better or different for myself. Let me look at this. She was so stuck in survival. Monica maybe was a little less stuck in survival than her mom. And so also Monica just has a really different personality from her mother, which I think is also what saves Monica, because Monica just gets it. I was watching this and I was like, yes, Monica, yes. Like this dinner was a guide on how to deal with a narcissistic parent, sincerely. Like, well, I'll say in terms of behavior, I think Monica, you can still tell she's like really angry and hurt and upset, which she has every reason to be, but that is just coming through her pores. And here's what's fascinating about narcissistic mothers is that your emotions about them will piss them off. Like if you're mad at them for something, they're mad at you for being mad at them. Okay. So I just think that Monica has just had it with this woman. But for me, it would be helpful for her to manage her own feelings for her own wellness. Okay. So let's see here. When Monica brings up Linda's childhood, Linda says, I'm over it. And here's what I want to say about that. Saying you're over your trauma and carrying the boulder of pain with you doesn't mean you're over it and it doesn't exist. It just means that you're going to go through your entire life spreading your pain like a plague. Sorry, that's the truth. I saw this really interesting meme on Instagram about, it's like a person and there's like a boulder attached to their leg. And like, that's what carrying trauma feels like. But also we have to remember that when we have unresolved trauma and we're not working on for ourselves, we accidentally run people over with the boulder. We hit them, we get them dirty. We do all these things because of our pain. And so Linda, because she's not willing to be aware of her pain, she's not ready to process it, she just doesn't want to touch it, she's just going to keep slinging pain until she is ready to do better, and she may never be ready to do better. So that's something interesting. Linda, just seems really afraid of her pain, which the true generational trauma that I see is that Monica also shares that. These are two women who have experienced awful childhoods and they are afraid to feel their pain. And that sucks, right? It sucks because really the only way out is through. For those of you who have listened to this podcast before, you have heard me say this time and time again, the only way out is through. And we have to believe that we are strong enough to survive the journey. And Monica is strong enough to survive it. She has to do better for herself. Okay. So Monica discussed, really accurately the long line of resentment and the generational trauma. And what I want to say about that is she's right, because I believe that Monica's mother has always resented Monica for having a better life, for being on a TV show, because let's not forget, Linda moved to New York to, have her dreams come true. And all of a sudden she's watching her daughter get the accolades, the fame, whatever you want to call it, that she so desperately wanted. I can just feel the jealousy seeping through Linda's pores. And I just think that, it's the interesting thing about narcissistic parents, especially narcissistic mothers, is that they will say the words that they're happy that you had things better than they did, but they don't really feel that. And that's apparent in their behaviors. And so the proof of this resentment is Linda putting Monica in the trunk of a car to make out with a boy. I can't even. So Linda, in order to get, she was so desperate for love from a man, she literally took her child, put her in a trunk, which Linda was like, it wasn't a trunk. Here, what did she say? It was not a trunk. It was my boyfriend's Corvette. It was strictly kissing. We thought she was asleep. Does that make it better? That's the thing too about sometimes narcissistic parents, which is like they try to make excuses for their behavior that are so insane. It's like, well, is that still okay? Like that seems totally insane to me. But to me, that's just proof of her resentment. It's like, I'm not going to let this little shit get in the way of me getting love from a man, which I desperately need. And, so again, Linda's response was, what was I supposed to do? My brain exploded because she's literally asking Monica, what was I supposed to do? I needed love and you were like a boulder on my ankle. What was I supposed to do? And she just has no awareness of how fucked up that is. She just has no awareness of it. And then Linda said, get over it. When do I get forgiven? And when she says get over it, she did this really interesting hand gesture because 75% of communication is nonverbal. And so nonverbals to me are really interesting. So Linda literally took her hand like this and pushed Monica away. Get over it. When do I get forgiven? And basically what that tells me is that she just wants Monica to just take it, to just get over it, and to just forgive her mom. But here's the thing. You can't be forgiven if you're not sorry, and if you don't offer an apology or any sort of emotional support. So that's the thing with a narcissistic parent. They want to say the shallow words and then just have you be like, oh, okay, well, you said you're sorry. But your behaviors aren't indicating that you're sorry because you're still doing the same old stuff. Narcissists often require blanket love, support, and forgiveness without doling any of it out themselves. So I just think, that was really interesting. Again, I want to say, go, Monica. Monica, here's my message to Monica, okay? You know who your mother is. You know why she is the way she is, because Monica's the one who laid out the generational trauma. She understands that. You know how to be a cycle breaker and do it different to an extent, because clearly Monica's her relationship dysfunction and all these issues is a function of what she witnessed growing up, right? Because she has not worked through it, because she has not gotten therapy around it. You can have the awareness, but Monica needs the other part, which is so Monica knows that behavioral changes are great, but behavioral change is different from accepting and processing feelings. Okay. And so the one thing that Monica hasn't done is process those feelings. As I mentioned before, the only way out is through. So to be honest, if Monica's listening to this, girl, you did so much of the work. You've done it. You see it. You understand it. You're validated. I'm validating you. You're right. So now do the work on your own, which will give you the freedom that you want to have. Because truly, with a narcissistic parent, it is about trying to give ourselves the most freedom we can possibly have. That's the goal. And the only way out is through, and processing emotions. That's the way to do it. And listen, I'm saying this very matter-of-factly because, a lot of people want to believe that there's a different answer. There's a shortcut around the pain, but it sucks. There isn't. But through that pain will come knowledge and insight and understanding and freedom. So really what you get is it's so worth it. But I understand that the pain, it scares people. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about like what is narcissistic abuse, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some common examples and maybe some ways, because I know a lot of people listening to this and watching this are like, okay, well, what do I do now? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So narcissistic abuse is a term to describe a type of emotional abuse that comes from a person with narcissistic personality disorder. Okay. Narcissistic abuse it's just incredibly painful to endure because most people, they're gaslit so much that they still as adults will be like, well, maybe I'm dramatic. Maybe this didn't happen. And it's like, no, it did. Your parent or caregiver is just really good at gaslighting you. And so it makes people, especially women, second guess themselves for the rest of their life until they really work on it. People with narcissistic personality disorder have a constant need for admiration. So that's why when children can get so unhappy with a narcissistic parent, it can be so problematic because it's like they just need this admiration. And when they're not getting it, it can just be a miserable place. Narcissistic parents also don't know anything really about you and have never cared really to get to know you. They may ask you really stupid, shallow questions and you're like, what? And that's just like that's just their stuff. They don't know how to reciprocate, and they just don't know how to do that. So some features of narcissistic abuse: love bombing in romantic relationships. Because let me be clear, you can have narcissistic abuse again with a romantic partner, with a parent, with a coworker, with a boss. Ugh, I've had plenty of those. And you can experience these in all different types of relationships. So love bombing, gaslighting, isolation, ignoring boundaries, and projecting are some of the like main features of all this. And so I'm going to give you some common examples of narcissistic abuse so you can really, again, hopefully this is to validate folks that have spent a lifetime going through this. So a common example is withholding, aka the silent treatment. No, not good. And here's the reason why this is so damaging. The one thing that I believe is a relationship killer, I said this on my last podcast, is when people stop communicating. When people, whether it's couples or friends or family, when people stop communicating, it's like death to the relationship. So when you're withholding from someone, it's essentially like the equivalent of holding a pillow over someone's face and then like letting them come up for breath and like then just holding it back on them. That's kind of like you're literally trying to harm the person by withholding your love and communication. It's just not good. Listen, if you find yourself, if that's a toxic trait that you have, listen, all you can say is I am aware of this and let me try to do better. Okay. Emotional blackmail is also super common. So meaning that if you don't do what the abuser wants you to do, they'll, well, I know your deepest, darkest secrets, or I know this, or I know that. I'm going to use your emotions against you, that sort of stuff. Insults, of course, are huge with narcissistic abuse. Name calling, harsh criticism. So, like motherfucker and, stuff like that. That is meant to manipulate. Malicious gossip. That is another huge one. Deliberately spreading lies about your behaviors, and damage to your reputation is more important than actually being there for someone. So for example, during Angie's Easter brunch, when Monica was like crying alone, by the way, which was the saddest thing I've ever seen, because for anyone who watched that scene, here's why she was so mad. Nobody was on her team. Nobody, not her mother, not her castmates, not a single person in that room was on her side. And what Monica felt was her mother aligning with Angie, which I guarantee her mother has done throughout her life, because what's important to Linda in that moment was that she seems like a great mother and that Monica seems like the crazy person. And isn't that exactly what happened? How many of those women after that said, I would never talk to my mother that way? Well, good. I'm glad you don't have a narcissistic mother that you have to talk to that way, or that you have to experience those feelings around. I don't like the judgment in terms of, well, if you see someone having a tough moment with a parent, let's not judge them because you have no idea what those people have been through. I just didn't like the judgment from all the ladies. Well, I wouldn't talk to my mother that way. Guess what? Just because someone's a parent doesn't mean they deserve your undying love and devotion if they are causing you harm. Bloop. Okay. Other things are like sabotage, accusations. So the accusations, this is huge because I noticed Linda doing this a lot, is it helps people deflect from their own behavior. So like when Linda was doing things like making accusations to Monica about how she's been a bully to her and she's done this and she's done that. Well, that's Linda's way to deflect from her own stuff because she doesn't want to see it. She's not capable of it. She doesn't want to look at it. Okay, so here are some general observations of this whole thing to kind of wrap up, okay? When people don't get the love they need as a child, they don't stop loving their parent, they stop loving themselves, okay? They lack self-esteem, they lack self-worth. And here's one interesting thing about Monica that I kind of wanted to tie all this together. I think Monica tends to over-rely on material items to make her feel valuable because she never felt valuable as a child and she doesn't feel valuable now as an adult. When Monica had that scene with her mother about getting the purse and crying, even though she really couldn't afford it, blah, blah, blah. It is no surprise to me that Monica, because she hasn't gotten those strong roots yet, she feels like she needs her car. She needs a Range Rover. She needs a purse to feel valuable, to look valuable, when in reality, when you do the work to work through some of this stuff, that is what makes you feel valuable. The stuff is just temporary. It just provides a kind of a bump and a feeling of, I'm valuable. This means something. So that's kind of my interpretation of Monica with the whole purse. She just needs to learn to feel valuable as a person. And then I think some of that other stuff with the cars and the purses will maybe fall by the wayside. But also, let's not forget, she is on a TV show where you're supposed to have lavish stuff. And I think people on the internet have been really critical of her. Like, she's a regular person and she's not rich and she's not that. But like, remember when housewives used to be that? Remember when it was just like regular people? Listen, in New York and OC, like, did they have money? Sure. But like, I just don't like where this whole housewives thing is going, where these fans are like, we want our housewives just like ridiculously rich. Like I've gotten more from Monica's stuff with her mother in Salt Lake City than any of the other ladies have provided. Personally, what are they providing? I don't know. For me, not a whole lot. I mean, maybe for you guys, entertainment. But I'm speaking in terms of actual stuff that matters. Monica is really providing it. So for me, I think she's amazing. I also want to say that the least likely people to pass down generational trauma are the ones who are self-aware enough to be afraid of it. So when I heard Monica saying, I just don't want to do this with my girls, guess what? You've already won. You've already won. You've already been able to be aware of it, to recognize it, and to have the fear. And through that alone will prevent you from passing it down as significantly as you would have otherwise. Now, is there other stuff that I think Monica needs to work on just so she can help refine that for her girls? For sure. But anyone who's listening to this, that you're like actively afraid of like passing that on, or you actively are thinking of trying to do it different, congratulations, you've already won. That's huge. That is a huge, huge, huge thing. So I just want to say that. The last thing I want to talk about, because this is a pretty controversial topic, is contact versus no contact with a narcissistic parent. So again, what I want to say about that is remember the spectrum that I talked about, okay? For some folks, no contact with a narcissistic parent or boss or caregiver or what have you may be life-saving. It is absolutely, you are not able to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Having connection with that parent and no contact is the only way to do that. There are some people on the other end of the spectrum that sometimes communication, self-reflection, and boundaries is enough to maintain a relationship. And I think the key to that is to not have any expectations about what the relationship is. So for example, if you have a narcissistic parent and there's like one thing you have in common, or there's a hobby, or there's something that you like to do, okay, do that. If that's healthy and that's great for you and that works for you. Part of this is grieving the loss of the parent that you wanted or needed, and accepting the parent that you have. And again, only in certain circumstances this is possible. Please understand, I'm not saying this is all circumstances, but I have helped people in both situations. I have worked with people that have successfully, maintained their boundaries and, maintained a relationship light with a parent. And then there's some people who can't do it. So the key to making this successful is not only the self-awareness, but boundaries. And I'm going to take it a step further and following through with boundaries. So what happens is sometimes people will set a boundary with a parent or someone, and then that person will immediately break the boundary because they're going to. A narcissistic parent will always break a boundary, will breach it every single time. You have to follow through on the consequence of whatever that boundary is. So follow through is key. So for example, if you have a parent and you say, you cannot speak to me like this, and then they speak to you like that, then you need to exit and you need to follow through on that boundary. And then they're not going to have access to you for that period of time, right? So it's very nuanced. It's very individualized. Every situation is different. I send love to every single human who has dealt with this. And just know, I hope this podcast has been validating. I hope it has given you some information and some knowledge, but most importantly, I hope you have felt the love and the validation from me to you sincerely. So this is going to be it for my podcast today. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening and for your continued support. And so what I will do quick is plug myself. If you can please go wherever you listen to podcasts, if you can subscribe to the podcast, follow the podcast. I appreciate it. If you go over to YouTube and you subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate that. I'm also Your Bish Therapist on Instagram and on TikTok and on, Facebook. I'm also on Facebook. By the way, I might be deleting that soon because I think Facebook has turned into kind of a cesspool, but TBD on that. So please go ahead, follow me on Instagram, all the support. I really sincerely, genuinely appreciate it. So for today, I'm going to say, take care of yourselves and each other, and please be the light in the world you want to see. Thank you. Disclaimer: posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Your Bish Therapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and are not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT Podcast and on its social media is provided for generational informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you see, read, or hear on YBT Podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.